Hello and welcome back to Planet 40k. Pressing on with our Forge World models from the Space Marine Force. This time we're going to be looking at the Sicaran Punisher tank. We're going to be doing its review and we're going to be giving a Planet 40k star rating at the end of the video. So let's get straight into the datasheet for the Sicaran Punisher. It's obviously a Forge World model, so it's coming from the Armour Compendium book. It's coming in the heavy support section and it's going to be costing you 155 points. Or 10 power level. So it's got a quicker movement of 14 inches, weapon skill 6+, ballistic skill 3+, strength 6, toughness 7, wounds 14, attacks 3, leadership 8 and a 2+ save. It obviously has a degrading stat line, so the movement and ballistic skill will be degraded as well as the attacks, but the attacks aren't really that important. It's not really a melee vehicle. But it's quite interesting to note that it's got a 14-inch movement as opposed to a 12-inch movement, and it's got an armor save value of a 2+. So let's get on with the war gear that the Punisher will carry. So it's equipped with a heavy bolter and a Punisher rotary cannon. So the heavy bolter, quite a standard weapon, 36-inch range, heavy 3, strength 5, -1 AP with 2 damage. You get one of them, quite a standard weapon within the Space Marine Force there. As for the Punisher rotary cannon, that's not so common. It's 36-inch range, quite like the heavy bolter there, but this is heavy 18, strength 6, -1 AP and 1 damage. So 18 shots at strength 6, that's going to be really good against the current meta of Sisters of Battle or Drukhari, for example, because they're all toughness 3 models. So you're going to be wounded on 2s with the cannon. With 18 shots with your best profile, which is ballistic skill value of a 3+, you would hope for at least 12 hits on average at least. And then if you are wounded on 2s, you'd expect around 10 wounds to go through there. Then -1 AP, which does become -2 AP in the first battle round, which we'll talk about in the ability section. That's going to be doing tons of work again against those toughness 3 models. They probably do have an inbun save, but it's going to be removing quite a lot of models there. Now there are weapon options for this tank. The first one, you can add 2 additional heavy bolters or 2 additional las cannons. The second point is you can equip a hunter killer missile, which is quite a standard upgrade for a tank model. And then the final one, you can add an additional storm bolter. Let's go through all those quickly. The first one being one of the following, so 2 heavy bolters or 2 las cannons. So we've already kind of gone through the heavy bolter profile, but it's going to be 15 points per heavy bolter. So if you're adding 2 more on top of that, that's going to be 30 points. So that will give you a total of 3 heavy bolters on this tank, which will be 9 shots at strength 5. So pretty good against elite infantry that have got 2 wounds or more there. If you wanted this more of an anti-tank weapon, you can add the 2 las cannons instead. It's going to cost you 20 points per las cannon. They're 48 inches, heavy 1, strength 9, -3 AP and the damage being D6. That's your more anti-tank option if you wanted to do that. The hunter killer missile is also an anti-tank weapon, 48 inch, heavy 1, strength 10, -2 AP and the damage will be D6. However, you only get 1 shot with this throughout the entire battle, and you're best using this in battle round 1 because the AP will go to -3. Then you can add a storm bolter to the mix for 5 additional points. It's only 24-inch range, but it is rapid fire too. Bolter discipline won't work with this. Strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. Quite a standard weapon for light infantry. So tons of that coming out of this tank, but I particularly like that rotary cannon with 18 shots at strength 6. I think that's a real good weapon there. As for the actual abilities, you've got Angels of Death. So the only one that's really going to have any effect is the combat doctrines. Shock Assault 2, I guess, but you're not really a melee tank. It's not going to do too much, but the combat doctrines to get an additional AP, depending on what battle round it is. So for example, battle round 1, all the heavy weapons get an additional AP to their profile. It's then got Martial Legacy, which unfortunately means it's going to cost you 1 additional command point just to field this unit. Even though it's a heavy support option and not a Lord of War option, it's still going to cost you 1 command point there. It's then got the Explode ability as well, due to it being a vehicle, so when it does get destroyed, on a roll of a 6, units within 6 inches will suffer D3 mortal wounds, so quite a standard explosion for a vehicle. Then finally the actual keywords of note. It's a vehicle, so it's going to interact with a few different things there. It's got the smokescreen keyword for a stratagem, which we'll go over now as well. So the vehicle keyword is going to interact with the Armor Contempt stratagem for 1 command point to ignore mortal wounds on a roll of a 5+. And then that smokescreen keyword is going to interact with this stratagem, which is conveniently called smokescreen. Again, it's 1 command point, and it will be a -1 to hit this tank for your opponent. As for some synergy for this tank, you've got the Tech Marine, due to the fact that it can use the Blessing of the Omnissiah ability to heal D3 lost wounds to a vehicle model within 3 inches of the Tech Marine. And it's got Awaken the Machine Spirit, so a vehicle within 3 inches of the Tech Marine will get +1 to the hit rolls, which could be massive when one of your weapons has 18 shots. When you're hitting on 2s, you're not missing many there, are you? You do have the option of upgrading that Tech Marine to a Master of the Forge. to regain 3 lost wounds as opposed to D3 lost wounds, so something you want to be thinking about if you want to keep your tank up and running for much longer in the battle. Now if you wanted to take a librarian just to give it an in-1 save using the Psychic Fortress, you can do that too, if you keep it within 6 inches of the librarian to gain that 5+ invulnerable save. As for chapter tactics, I'll talk about some of the main ones that are going to synergize, starting with Dark Angels. So if it remains stationary, it's going to get +1 to the hit roll. Again, that's going to be massive on this kind of unit because it's got loads of attacks at range. And Imperial Fists are also going to interact quite nicely because of, firstly, you remove light cover from your opponent's units, but secondly, when using your bolt weapons, any unmodified hit roll of a 6 will score 1 additional hit. So when you've got lots of heavy bolters and a storm bolter on top of that, there's quite a lot of bolt weapons within the tank. I've just added their super doctrine on the screen here for you in case you're using the las cannons or the hunter killer missile. Because they're strength 7 or more, when you're firing against vehicles or buildings in the first battle round, it's going to add 1 to the damage. Eye Hands are next with their chapter tactics. The flesh is weak, you're going to get a 6+ feel no pain save, and double the amount of wounds will be considered for the purposes of determining which characteristics you use on your damage profile. It'll be very difficult to bracket your tank down to a worse ballistic skill and a worse movement there. And similar to the Imperial Fist, they've got a sub doctrine which is Calculated Fury. Again, it's going to be done in the Devastator doctrine, which is turn 1. When you're firing your heavy weapons, you're going to be able to reroll hit rolls of a 1. Then finally you got the Wrathful Machine Spirit Stratagem for 2 command points with the Iron Hands, used on a vehicle model in the shooting phase or the fight phase, but this one will be in the shooting phase. And if you're using that stratagem, you're getting to reroll all the hit rolls rather than just the hit rolls of 1. This is all the hit rolls and it can be used in any turn. Ultramarines have got the ability to fall back and shoot, although it will be at a -1 to hit penalty, especially with those heavy weapons, because it'll be a -1 to the heavy weapons to fire anyway. So this gives you the added option to fall back and then actually pick your target as well. So that's all the synergy worth mentioning today, so let's get on to the summary for the Sicaran Punisher. Starting with the good, it's got 14 wounds with a 2+ armor save. Now I've always said that a 2+ armor save is almost as good as having an in-1 save in a way, because even a -3 AP weapon still gives it a 5+ armor save. Unless it's got a ridiculously high AP on your opponent's weapon, it's always going to have some sort of save there. It's then got a 14-inch movement, which is very fast. That's matching bike units in terms of speed, so this can be getting around the board pretty quickly, getting into range with almost everything it's got. Just getting into a better position as well, because your opponents could be quite easily hiding behind cover, obscuring terrain and whatnot. So being able to dart around 14 inches to flank your opponent's units from hiding, so they're not going to be hiding behind that obscuring terrain. Of course, it's got a lot of DACA from those weapons, all those heavy bolter weapons, and that main rotary cannon as well. I think there's a lot of shots coming from this thing, so especially toughness 3 is going to really suffer against this thing because it's doing a lot of damage at strength 6. It's then got the option of using the smokescreen stratagem for a -1 to hit, which is adding more to its resiliency. Again, 14 wounds and a 2+ save, now adding a -1 to hit as well. That will keep this thing up and running for a fair amount of time within the game. And then the actual cost is pretty cheap, 155 points at base value. Of course, you're going to add the upgrades on top of that, and it's going to come closer to 200 points if you're going to add those things on top of it. I still think that's pretty cheap for what it can do. To me, this is matching up very closely to a Redemptor Dreadnought. Then the final thing is that it can fire into combat due to it being a vehicle, and there's no blast ability on these weapons, so if it does get tied up in combat, it's still firing all of its payload at whatever charges it. So on to the bad. The tanks offer nothing in melee. If you do compare this again to a Redemptor Dreadnought, at least a Redemptor Dreadnought is going to have a strength ×2 weapon with a Redemptor Fist, whereas a tank doesn't really have much. Its weapon skill over 6+ with no actual melee weapon, so it's not doing anything in combat apart from firing in the shooting phase on your own turn. The next thing is the Martial Legacy ability, which costs you 1 command point, which is effectively the same as having a Lord of War model with a super heavy auxiliary detachment, but that seems to be the cost of taking some of these bigger Forge World units at the moment. It's got a damage table. You've got to penalise the damage table, because when you're looking at the actual wounds characteristic of 14, that does seem great, but when it gets down to 6 or less, it does get bracketed, so that reliability is hindered somewhat there. And the final thing is it's not a core unit. Again, I'm comparing that Redemptor Dreadnought, that is a core unit, so it can be very easily buffed with chaplains, with librarians, with captains, lieutenants, all that kind of thing, whereas this tank isn't going to have that option of being buffed by certain character units. So before we get into the actual rating, we're going to be doing our shout out of today, which is going to the Faint T for their comment on our Leviathan Dreadnought review we did just recently. And a lot of comments like this, they're just helping the algorithm, helping our video get boosted within the YouTube searches. It's a massive help to us, so thank you for that. So keep those comments coming, really appreciate it. So let's get on to the rating today. So I'm going to give the Sicaran Punisher tank a Planet 40k rating of 4.5 stars. I really rate this tank. It's not quite as good as a Redemptor Dreadnought, but I would give a Redemptor Dreadnought a 5-star. But against the current meta, which is where I'm looking at it at the moment, against those Sisters of Battle, the Drukhari, those two in particular, and even a few previous codex like the Death Guard for example, Strength 6 going against Toughness 5 with 1 damage is exactly where you want it to be. So I'm really rating that weapon in particular with the 18 shots, and that's why I've gone with the Planet 40k rating of 4.5 stars. So that's the end of the review today, guys. Remember to sub if you are new and drop a like to help that algorithm out, and drop a comment too. Remember, the best comment will be shouted out on our next Space Marine video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.